There are certain people in our lives that hold a special place in our hearts. They are the people we trust the most, the ones closest to us, like friends, family, and if we are lucky, our life partner who we marry and end up living with. Sophie Baker was one of those lucky people who, in addition to having a solid social cycle, had her boyfriend Anthony Piper by her side, always supporting her, a blessing in her life. The couple met some time ago at a conference held by the bank they worked for. At the time, they had the same position and worked at the same bank, but in different branches. On the first day of the conference, they ended up connecting and never let go of each other, starting a relationship soon after. Everyone in Sophie's life said that things between them were happening too fast, but she said that with her, it was always like this, intense and crazy, and that she was sure that Anthony was the man of her life. Contrary to what people thought, the couple lived very happily, and Anthony was an incredible partner for Sophie. The woman's only objection was Anthony's jealousy that came from a certain insecurity he carried within himself. Sometimes he blurted out that he didn't like one friend or another Sophie had, as he believed that they had ulterior motives with her. Or he didn't like Sophie posting bikini pictures on social media because, in his words, it wasn't necessary. For Sophie, that was not a big deal, as she believed that this behavior was normal, especially since she was an attractive woman, adored by everyone who knew her, and an extremely respected professional. The perfect combo, really. So she overlooked her boyfriend's jealousy and even thought it was cute, as if it were a proof of love. But she didn't stop doing what she wanted. She was a woman with a strong personality. The couple had been together for 6 months when they received the news that they would start working at the same branch, as there would be a redistribution of employees after a mass layoff. Anthony would be transferred to his girlfriend's branch and had been chosen to carry out a project with her, which would result in the promotion of one of the two to a higher position with a higher salary. Sophie had already worked at the agency for 3 years. As in her personal life, she was much admired at work, and in addition to being a great professional, she also brought joy to her colleagues' daily lives, always telling good stories to ease the work routine. In this context, Anthony arrived to join her, but until then, only the couple's closest friends and people knew that they had a relationship. They preferred to keep it a secret in the company, to avoid judgments and other problems, because although it was not prohibited, having a relationship with co-workers was not well regarded by most people. Sophie was excited to start the project with Anthony, and for her, being beside her partner, idealizing everything, was more important than the promotion itself. She was focused on the process, wanting to make the most of the situation, to get even closer to her boyfriend, and grow professionally with him. However, things didn't turn out exactly as Sophie imagined. Everything was going well at first. The couple was happier than ever. The project was moving forward, and Sophie even enjoyed the adrenaline of secretly dating Anthony. The couple's relationship grew even stronger, and Anthony became more clingy than usual, asking Sophie out to parties, to take trips on the weekends, and always asking her to spend more time with him. The woman tried to balance the work demands and her relationship, but on some occasions, she had to work hard to deliver what she needed to her boss. One day, Sophie had to present an essential part of the project she had worked out, but when she arrived in the presentation room and looked for the file, everything was gone. The project file was nowhere to be seen, and the spare flash drive she was sure was in her bag wasn't there either. The boss was disappointed, as it was an essential part for them to continue working that day, and now they would have to rearrange everything. Meanwhile, Anthony kept doing his work perfectly, doing everything that was proposed to him, managing to attract the superior's attention. Sophie was frustrated because after that day, only Anthony stood out in the meetings, unlike all the previous years in which Sophie was recognized for her good work constantly. Something strange always happened that prevented Sophie from delivering what the boss asked. The presentation's files disappeared, or the emails that the boss sent to her didn't arrive, some problem appeared, and the next day, Anthony was the highlight of the project. The man was radiant with his accomplishments, but wasn't pleased with his girlfriend's lack of support. "Babe, I think you should be more supportive. It seems like you're not even happy for me. Is it because I stood out and you didn't?" Anthony said a few times, and Sophie thought to herself, "Am I being envious? Am I being a bad girlfriend?" She was in doubt as to why she had that feeling of frustration. She was exhausted and spent sleepless nights writing the project only to find out that the next day it did not comply with what was requested, or the files disappeared. Little did Sophie know that someone was sabotaging her work. So it was until the end of the project, and when it ended, Anthony was promoted with merit to the new position with higher salary and benefits. He took Sophie to a fancy restaurant to celebrate, but the woman was sad because for the first time in her professional career, she didn't do a good job and she couldn't even explain why. Everything was so strange, but she tried to be happy for her boyfriend and went out to celebrate with him. From that day on, Anthony started a new phase, happier, more outgoing, and growing in his new role, while Sophie kept working on hers, trying to maintain quality despite the disappointment. Until just 3 months after the project was done, Sophie was suddenly fired without receiving a proper explanation. It was really a surprise because there was no cost reduction in the company or anything like that. That dismissal made no sense to her. Sophie was devastated, and who was there to comfort her? Her beloved Anthony. The only option left for Sophie was to accept and look for a new job. Fortunately, in only 1 month, Sophie got the same position she had previously at another bank with a slightly lower salary, but enough to reassure her after so many disappointments. And finally, she and Anthony were ready to make their relationship public for everyone through posts on all social media. Therefore, the people who worked with Anthony, Sophie's former co-workers, found out that they were together. Shortly afterwards, Sophie received a call from Jessie, the closest person she had at her previous job, saying that she needed to speak with her urgently. Jessie was from the HR at the bank and was very fond of Sophie, with whom she sometimes chatted during lunch break. As Sophie and Anthony's relationship had just been made public, Jessie saw the post on Facebook and was in shock. She was so shocked that instead of sending a text, she called Sophie and said, "I just saw that you started dating Anthony." As Sophie also liked Jessie, she decided to better explain the situation between her and Anthony. "Yes, we've actually been dating for a while. I can share it with you. We've been together since before the project. We met at that bank conference, I don't know if you remember. We've been dating for almost a year now." Jessie listened to everything in silence and replied, "Look, Sophie, I'm going to be honest with you. Anthony was the one who asked for your resignation from the company. He went to HR after you finished the project and said that you were depressed, that you couldn't deliver anything, and was unable to carry out your duties." Jessie said the boss sided with him because he and Anthony had become good friends, and after Anthony's success in the project, he chose to comply with his request and fired Sophie. Sophie couldn't believe what she was hearing. She said she needed to reason and thanked her colleague, then hung up. The woman was taken by countless feelings: sadness, anger, disappointment. She didn't believe that Anthony could have done that. The next morning, Sophie arranged to meet Jessie at a coffee shop to have a better conversation and ask for some advice on what to do about it. Jessie was a smart girl, as was Sophie, and suggested that she sue Anthony, but Sophie was apprehensive because despite everything, she still liked him. So she decided to test him out first to make sure of his motivations, and depending on what he said, she would actually sue him. Sophie said goodbye to her colleague, and when she got home, she sent a text to Anthony asking him to meet for lunch that same day. She didn't want to wait a second longer to find out the truth. She took advantage of the hours she had before meeting him to think perfectly about how she would put the plan into action. deciding that she would record the entire conversation to use against Anthony in case she needed it in a possible lawsuit. Sophie got ready and looked impeccable to meet her boyfriend. It didn't take much effort for her to look beautiful, but she felt that that day would be remarkable, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to look more beautiful than usual. When she arrived at the restaurant, there wasn't a single person who wasn't staring at her walking over to the table Anthony was sitting. As usual, he caught the glances at her and looked uncomfortable. "You look beautiful, babe," he said. It was a compliment, but he spoke in such a dry tone that it didn't sound like one. "I know," Sophie replied while sitting down, with her hidden cell phone already recording every word that came out of their mouths. "So, I heard something that surprised me a bit." Sophie started to speak. "I received some documents from an anonymous person stating that you were responsible for my dismissal, that you went to HR and said that I was depressed. Well, is it true?" Anthony turned pale and started crying desperately, holding Sophie's hand. "Baby, please forgive me. I did this because I was too scared that our relationship would be discovered and it would affect us at work. Please believe me, I would never do anything to harm you. Now that I've been promoted, we can even live together. I can pay most of the expenses. Let's forget about this. I love you." The man pleaded. For Sophie, the disappointment she felt earlier turned only into anger. She couldn't believe that was the reason he did what he did, because a person who really loves someone would never do that. It was unacceptable that he decided Sophie's destiny that way, putting an end in a month to everything she had built in the 3 years she worked at the bank. Sophie had already decided that she would sue him, but she wanted to test him even more. "You did this to protect us? Please, Anthony, you expect me to believe that after making up a bunch of lies and pretending to be concerned about me?" Sophie said angrily. That's when Anthony showed a side of himself Sophie had never seen. "At least now I'm on top. You've had the top to yourself since forever. Everyone looking up to you, everyone loving you, and me, I'm always left aside. How do you think I feel? How do you think this affects my masculinity? Now I get paid more than you, and I can have any woman I want. You don't deserve someone like me. Oh, and the parties and trips during the project were my idea to get you tired enough so I could delete your emails and all your files that disappeared. I deleted each one of them. You're not the only one who's smart," said Anthony, preparing to leave, but Sophie got up first and took her cell phone out of the bag, saying, "You're an idiot, Anthony. I recorded everything, and now you'll have to find a lawyer smarter than you to help you." After she said that, she walked off, leaving her ex-boyfriend at the table, perplexed. He even thought about going after her and breaking her cell phone, but that would only make his situation worse. There were too many witnesses. Sophie went home and organized everything to sue him as soon as possible. As much as she still needed to get over him, the woman had no doubt that she needed to do that for all the financial and psychological damage that Anthony caused her, motivated by ego and envy. Anthony's lawyer was very good, but in addition to Sophie having a better one, the evidence she had against her ex was very strong, and he was sentenced to 4 months of community service and to pay Sophie $50,000 in compensation for moral damages. In addition, he was fired from the bank, and Sophie was hired in his place with an even higher salary. Nowadays, Sophie occupies one of the most important positions in the bank and married Jesse's brother, and the HR colleague became one of her closest friends after what happened. Nothing went as Sophie had planned, and Anthony wasn't who she imagined, but she felt that all that had to happen for her to grow at her work, and above all, for her to find the people who truly deserve the special place in her heart. If you know any similar stories, write about it in the comments. Like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more fantastic stories.